Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from the 7th chapter in the book of Hebrews. We made it all the way up to the 10th verse. We're going to take it from 11 all the way home to 28, and we're just going to review what we covered in the previous lesson, which begins in the 13th verse of the 6th chapter. And the name which appears and abounds throughout, start to finish, is Abraham. First, he is linked to a promise. Then in the 7th chapter, he is compared unfavorably to Melchizedek. Melchizedek's superiority is established over him. But it begins with the promise that was given to Abraham that Elohim swore on none greater. He swore on himself as there is none other greater to swear upon. And the promise was, just to have this nation and people, and just he gave it to a 75-year-old childless man, that he would be the father of many nations. And this did come true, but he had to wait 25 years for Isaac to be born. And in between, he did father, Ishmael, who became, and then after that, he gave birth to the Midianites. So the Hebrew people are not the only nation to spring from his loins, but the Hebrew one, or the chosen one. And that promise took patience. It wasn't until he was 99 that he finally conceived, and 100 that Isaac was born. And, he made Joseph wait 13 years, he made Abraham wait 25, he made Moses wait 40, and he made his own son wait 30. So if, don't just stay the course, and, don't give up if you want to fulfill your calling. Verse 19, which we have as an anchor of the life, both safe and firm, and entering into that within the veil, where Yahshua has entered as a forerunner for us, having become high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So an anchor is an instrument that a navigator, a ship captain, will drop when he wants his boat to stay still and to stay steady in one location. The anchor sinks it to the bottom of the ocean, which makes the ship able to stay afloat and still. And so that is the anchor of life. In this oath and in this promise and in the one who gave it is this anchor of life, which anchors us to life. It's reliable, it's steady, it's sturdy, it's strong. And the veil connects us to the temple. That's temple vocabulary, and tabernacle before that. But Yahshua, who is our high priest, entered into it as before us, because he was made before us. This was appointed before the foundation of the earth, and he became a priest after Melchizedek, having satisfied the sacrificial element of his sacrifice on earth. And Melchizedek, the concept of an eternal priesthood of Melchizedek is not original to the author of Hebrews. He is in the 110th Psalm. This was something that was a messianic message that was delivered to David. But he reminds him also, the reader also, that Abraham tithed to Melchizedek in his day. He was a real figure, a historical human, and a real person. He was the king of Salem, priest of the Most High, so he combined two offices that Yahshua also combined. He was not a priest while he walked on the earth because he was not of the tribe, but he was the king, although his throne and his kingdom were not of the earth. Wherever the king goes, there he is. So he was a king even when he came to the earth as a lamb. But also his name, Son of Righteousness and Son of Salem, which translates as King of Peace. These mean things. He is the King of Peace, the Prince of Peace, you read of in Isaiah 9:6, and that translates as Salem. That is the suffix of Jerusalem, the capital city, the site and center of religiosity and worship in the Judeo-Christian history. And then it elaborates on the whole theme of the everlasting priesthood of Melchizedek, the order, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but having been made like the Son of Yahweh, remains a priest for all time. So Melchizedek, all we know about him is what we read of in the 14th chapter. He's an obscure but prominent figure, and he's different from all the other righteous men that are mentioned in that they are given, that we know their genealogy, their lineage, but this has caused some excessively speculative Christians, scholars, to impiously imagine that the Messiah was Melchizedek. It was a pre-incarnation form, but that's not rooted in. The point is, from the scriptural record, we don't know where he came from, when he was born, whose son he was, and that connects him to the everlasting concept and his eternal priesthood. Now, the priesthood of earth, the Aaronic priesthood, they are imperfect and they are impermanent, because each of their priesthood dies. They are human, they are man, but his priesthood is eternal and is heavenly. And then he just elaborates, he says in the 7th verse, and it's not beyond all dispute that the lesser is greater than is blessed by the better. So Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek, and this ties into what we read in the 16th verse. For men do indeed swear by the one greater. So that's Yahweh, Elohim, swearing on his own name, as there is no one greater than that. And then in the 9th verse we read, and one might say that through Abraham even Levi, who received tithes, gave tithes, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. So Levi was the son of Jacob, who was the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. So he existed in his loins at that time, and so he was connected to Abraham, who tithed to Melchizedek, and he was a priesthood. So before Levi, the one through whom the priestly tribe would spring, Levi himself did not serve as a priest on the earth, but Moses and Aaron were born into the tribe of Levite, and that automatically made the rest of them priest, the tribe of priest. But even he paid homage in the form, he was only in his father's loins, but he paid due deference and tribute and respect and tithed to the one who is greater. 11th verse, 7th chapter, lesson itself, book of Hebrews. Truly then, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people were given the law, why was there still need for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek, and not be called according to the order of Aaron? So if perfection, there are two items that are discussed, the Levitical priesthood and the law, and the former is imperfect and the latter is perfect. The law, there is nothing wrong with the law. It is a concrete expression of the will, character, and nature of Yahweh, and as such it is perfect. The law doesn't fail us, we fail the law, and that just means that it is powerless in itself to save us. Well, that'll make more sense as we delve deeper into this. But the Levitical priesthood are comprised of men. They had to offer sacrifices for their own sins. That was the protocol. They sacrificed on their own for their own sin before they did everyone else's, because they were human and they were impermanent, they were mortal, and so there is nothing the imperfection is manifest, and palpably so, in examining the priesthood of Aaron when compared to the high and heavenly priesthood of our sympathetic high priest, who we first meet in the 4th chapter. But his order is after Melchizedek, and it's a distinct one from the order of Aaron. Aaron was the high priest, the older brother of Moses. He was 3 years older, 83 when Moses was 80. Through him, the high priest was a descendant, was a hereditary office until the politics got intermixed and intermingled eventually. So the Aaronic priesthood had, now whether or not the temple was still operating and when the Epistle of Hebrews was written remains an open question, but the Aaronic priesthood, for all intents and purposes, was dead centuries ago. For the priesthood being changed of necessity, there also takes place a change of law. So the law, the capital letter law, the Torah, capital T, with which they were given the law through the Levitical priesthood, this was prescribed in the law that there was to be a priesthood who would tend to the sacrifices and intercede and pray for the people and just be their worship and their model. And they were the ones to whom the law, the supervision, the custodians and the stewards and the enforcers of were to be the priesthood. But the priesthood went lax throughout its history. This necessitated the office of prophets, and the prophets pointed to one who would fulfill the law. He would transcend the law by observing it perfectly in the flesh, in human form, and then ascend to heaven, where he is our high priest forever. He is both the sacrifice and the high priest. For he of whom it is said belongs to another tribe, from which no one had attended at the altar. This is the tribe of Judah. He is the lion of the tribe of Judah. The tribe of Judah was destined to rule, but they were also destined to spring the eternal king, the high priest, even though the tribe of Moses, the tribe of Levi, were given the task of priesthood, the high priesthood, the eternal priesthood, the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, remained to be one who would descend from Judah's tribe. For it is perfectly clear that our master arose from Judah, a tribe about which Moses never spoke of concerning priesthood. So Judah was the tribe that was destined to rule. This was declared in Genesis 49:10. But the tribe of Moses, now Moses, the only tribe he makes mention of in reference or anything relevant to the priesthood craft is in reference to his own tribe, that being the tribe of Levi, and is unambiguous. It is perfectly clear that there's no doubt or dispute that he was a son of Judah. He was from the tribe of Judah. And that it was equally undisputable that they had no priestly function in the Old Testament. And it is clearer still if another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek. So this is the priest who did arise in the likeness of Melchizedek, Melchizedek being implicitly, though not explicitly, eternal by illusion. He was a mortal man. He did die. He was flesh and blood. He wasn't the pre-incarnate form. But he was an illusion and a typology who pointed the way to the priesthood, which would be a longer lasting. So the priesthood of Aaron is done in a way with both in the Jewish and in the Christian. We do not have a priesthood of the popes, although the Catholics do, but they only get in the way. The true church's priesthood is submitted to the high priest, the one who is scripturally delegated that role, Yahshua Messiah. Who has become, not according to the law of fleshly command, but according to the power of an endless life. So his authority springs from his eternality, his own eternality. He was from the beginning, before the beginning, and was there in the beginning. And this is the power on which he rests his authority, not according to the law of fleshly command. This is not the law of Moses. This is something that emanates from his own eternal self and is therefore according to a higher principle than that which is written or recorded by Moses in the Pentateuch. Although it is there that we also read of Melchizedek, whose typology he is fulfilling. For he witnesses, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." This is David quoting the Messiah to come in Psalm 110, verses 4, I think, or verse 1. But that's where the theme originates, and those are the two original that's where the concept is born of a priest, a priesthood which lasts forever. So Melchizedek, it was David's mind under the guidance and influence and power and presence of the Spirit, which compelled him to the conclusion of this typology that would be fulfilled by the Son. Thou art my son, the other one, Psalm 2:7, that's quoted about 25 times in the New Testament. For there is indeed a laying aside of the former commandment because of its weakness and unprofitableness. So the law, as I earlier mentioned, is perfect, and it is perfect. It is intrinsically so. Its perfection does not waver. It does not compromise. It does not diminish. It is only to say that it is powerless in itself to offer the observer of it anything of salvific significance. Our righteousnesses are as filthy rags, because if we sin once, we sin them all. So the old law, the concept of salvation by legalism is over and done away with. The law still exists. It is still perfect. It still exists as a mirror to expose our sin and to examine the principles which govern and guide our moral conduct. So the law is not, I think it's absolutely essential for a Christian to have a studied knowledge of the Old Testament law just for the principles underlying them. For the law perfected not, but the bringing in of better hope, through which we draw near to Elohim. So the law is not a hope. It points to a hope. but it is not the hope itself, and the Jews still await their version of the Messiah. Ours has already come. So the audience to whom he was writing were Christian converts of Jewish birth and background, and the temptation was that for them to relapse into the law and just the inferior systems, the old wineskins which could not contain the newness of the wise skin. That is the author's intent and purpose, to compel them to continue to embrace the superior new covenant, of which he elaborates on more fully in the 8th chapter. And it was not without an oath. So this brings us back to what we first covered in the lessons prequel, the 6th chapter. He swore on an oath. There was none greater than himself to swear upon. So who does he swear on but himself? Who else can he? For they indeed become priest without an oath. But he who was with an oath of him, who said to him, Yahweh has sworn and shall not regret. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. So there is a concrete lack of oath, at least in the Aaronic priesthood. There is no oath by them, but it is considered an oath because he swears by himself. Yahweh has sworn and shall not regret. He does not repent of anything he ever does. He does not regret any action he takes. And he declares his son to be a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, because he is eternally alive and from the beginning and before the beginning. And once he satisfied the sacrificial aspect of the divine timetable in our plan of salvation, then he became our heavenly high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So the Old Testament saints, they had the Aaronic priesthood. They did not have the Melchizedek priesthood, the one who intercedes on our behalf, the one who satisfied the sacrifice and atonement without which we'd be unforgiven. So he procures our forgiveness with his own self-sacrifice, and animal sacrifices are henceforth now and forever obsolete. This concept or theme proliferates prominently in the 9th chapter. By as much as this, Yahshua has become a guarantor of a better covenant. The better covenant is the new covenant, which he elaborates on more fully in the 8th chapter, the concept of which can be traced back to Jeremiah and not much later Ezekiel. They both spoke of new covenant. So the Jewish system was old covenant, and this was what Jeremiah actually describes is something somewhat different than that. So we're not going to take it here, but the new covenant, the Christian covenant, we remain a covenant people. Our covenant is not of law; it is of grace, but we are still. This was made possible, and it belongs to, the guarantor who procured this covenant and made it all possible. He paid the ultimate price, which grace is love, which pays a price, and he paid that price for us. And indeed, those that become priests were many, because they were prevented by death from continuing. So the impermanence of the human priest life is a witness against, it testifies toward its own imperfection, because if they were perfect, they could continue. So the fact that there's a change of high priesthood at any given point in time in history is a testament and reflection, a negative one, that speaks kind of against it. Because, here you have, but he, because he remains forever, has an unchangeable priesthood. So his priesthood is, which connects to him and belongs to him, is as eternal as the one from whom it emanates. This was planned, and before the foundation of the earth, before the rising of the sun or anything else that we know, before time itself, this was meant to be, this was meant to come to pass, and it has come to pass, and the full effects and consequences of it remain to be fulfilled. So we each have lives in which we are given the opportunity to respond accordingly to our high priest and have him intercede on us. And he is unchangeable. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We read of in the 13th chapter, 8th verse. And because he is unchanging, so too is his priesthood, but he's not only unchanging, he is also unchangeable. So there's no force or exertion, whether internal or external, which can compel himself to change and be anything other than who he always was. Therefore he is also able to save completely those who draw near to Yahweh through him, ever living to make intercessions for them. So intercessor, oftentimes in the Old Testament we read of intercessory prayers such as Moses, Nehemiah, and a few others. Daniel certainly prays for his people on their behalf, and Yahshua fills that capacity for us. He is our intercessor. He is the one who takes our prayer through to the Father. He is our key, which unlocks the door to the Father's grace and presence. And when we have that, we have a beeline to the divine. We can automatically access the power which can answer our prayers in ways that are clear and comprehensible. But his ability is to save totally, so there's nothing partial or half-hearted about salvation. It is an all-or-nothing process, and he alone is constitutionally capable to save anyone, because in order to save anyone, you have to be capable of saving everyone. But the everyone is limited by the fact that everyone does not respond accordingly to what he has to offer. For it was fitting that we should have such a high priest, kind, innocent, undefiled, having been separated from sinners and exalted above the heavens. So the entire reason, this whole purpose, everything slides in motion to what they have today. This high priest who came and already went, his mortal ministry was done, but his heavenly ministry has began, and it continues to this day. And as he was on earth, so too is he in heaven. He was kind, he was innocent, he never sinned, he was certainly undefiled, there was no element of impurity or iniquity in him. And he was separated from sinners. He bore our sinful flesh and paid our sin penalty, but he was born without sin, he lived without sin, and he died without sin. So he is uncontaminated by sin, yet he inhabited the frail vessel of human flesh, and as such he alone is constitutionally capable to procure our salvation, to be our propitiation, and to serve us as our atonement. And he is exalted above the heavens. The heavens, he was before the heavens. He is greater than the heavens. He is the king of the heavens and of the earth. He is Elohim, who does not need, as those high priests, to offer us sacrifices day by day, first to his own sins, then for those of the people. For he did once for all when he offered up himself. So the sacrificial element of the priestly service is satisfied in the high priest himself. He is a king, he is a priest, he is also a lamb who bore our sin penalty and paid the price for our sins with his life. And there's no amount of animal blood that can compensate for a singular sacrifice. This much is made plain in the 9th chapter, 22nd verse. So the element of repetition in the sacrificial system of the Old Covenant is done with, obsolete, eternally invalid. There's no need to offer sacrifices daily in motion. And the other thing I want you to pay attention to is first for his own sins. So remember early in the lesson I made it known that the protocol was for the high priest to offer sacrifices for their own sins. This made them sinners, just like the ones they interceded for. So they had to get right with Yahweh before they could get others right with Yahweh. But they were sinners and they were imperfect, and so that the existence of imperfection in the Aaronic priesthood, which was commissioned from Yahweh but lacking the perfection of his nature because of human interference. But once more, there is nothing wrong with the law in itself. The law does not fail us, we fail it. 28th and final verse, for the law appoints as high priest men who have weaknesses, but the word of an oath which came after the law, the Son having been perfected forever. So the law, the writings of Moses, the Torah, they commission the high priest. It's a scripturally authorized office in the book of Leviticus, and it is understood to have human occupants which pass in perpetuity. At least the high priesthood was to be maintained through Aaron's descendants. His older two boys offered a wrong sacrifice, and they were smitten by the fire on account of their deliberate transgression. So the line ended up passing through Eleazar, I believe, or he may have been the grandson. But, what is written is no substitute for, or anywhere near as binding as the oath which was spoken, and this oath came after the law. This was recorded by the psalmist, so about a little less than 500 years after it. He points to his own descendant who would come a millennia hence, when his throne had died out for 586 plus years. But the son was perfect. He's always been perfect. It is incapable to improve or even add anything to him, so he is perfect and eternally so. And through him and not ourselves may we be perfected. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.